Hello. I read Lolita. I read it in about 2 weeks. I went some days where I read like a lot of pages and some days where I actually didn't read anything at all. But I read it, and I also rewatched the 1997 movie, and I watched for the first time the entirely too long 1962 movie, and I would love to talk about it with you. I do want to say that I think we can technically consider this the first book I've ever read. I read books when I was like a little kid. Like when I was like 7, I read the Boxcar children's books, and I read like the Diary of a Wimpy Kid books, Dark Diaries, middle school, Big Nate, shit like that. But in the past decade, I just haven't. It's been really hard for me, but now I'm putting in a real effort to start reading again, or really reading for the first time. And Lolita was my first venture into that, and I am very proud of myself for reading it. I know reading isn't a big deal, but I expect applause. The first thing I noticed when reading Lolita is that it is so different from both of the movies. I'll talk about the 1962 version of the movie later, but for the most part, I'm mostly just going to be comparing it to the 1997 version because I think the 1997 version does a way better job. But no matter how you look at it, both movies skip like the entire first third of the book, which is really funny because that's where all the meat is. The entire first third of the book is our narrator, our author, Humbert, talking about how horrible of a person he is. And it's hilarious to me. I don't know if I'm supposed to think this book is as funny as I found it, but I was straight up laughing out loud while reading this book. Here, let me read you some good stuff. The first thing I want to say is... Actually, no, there is no first thing. He's just a genuinely horrible person. Okay, so, page 18 of the book, pretty early into the book, he lets us in on his mental ideology. He says, "Now, I wish to introduce the following idea. Between the age limits of 9 and 14, there occur maidens, who to certain bewitched travelers, twice or many times older than they, reveal their true nature, which is not human, but nymphic, that is, demoniac. Demoniac? And these chosen creatures I propose to designate as nymphets." Between those age limits, are all girl children nymphets? Of course not. He talks about how ugly and fat children aren't nymphets. Sometimes pretty children also aren't nymphets, but 90% of the time, if you are between the ages of 9 and 14, and you're a pretty little white girl, you're asking for it. And you deserve whatever you get. That's essentially what he says. That's how I interpret it. He says, within the same age limits, the number of true nymphets is strikingly inferior to that of provisionally plain or just nice or cute or even sweet and attractive. Ordinary, plumpish, formless, cold-skinned, essentially human little girls with tummies and pigtails who may or may not turn into adults of great beauty. Look at the ugly dumplings in black stockings and white hats that are metamorphosized into stunning stars of the screen. A normal man given a group photograph of schoolgirls or Girl Scouts and asked to point out the comeliest one will not necessarily choose the nymphette among them. You have to be an artist, a madman, a creature of infinite melancholy, with a bubble of hot poison in your loins, super voluptuous flame permanently glow in your subtle spine. Oh, you have to cringe and hide. He basically says, I'm a professional at spotting when a 9-year-old girl is asking for me to fuck her. That's what he says. Also, the first time I watched the 1997 version of Lolita, I don't think I really got enough from it because I hadn't read the book first. I think the 1997 version is best enjoyed if you have already read the book. Because, like, I remember watching it and thinking, why are there so many feet shots? I remember watching it and think, why do they keep zooming in on this little girl's feet? It's weird. But if you read the book, dude's really into feet. I think that's a little Easter egg for people that have read the book. Can I find a feet line? Come on. I found one. I'll probably find more later, but she was barefooted. Her toenails showed remnants of cherry red polish, and there was a bit of adhesive tape across her big toe. And God, what I would not have given to kiss then and there those delicate-boned, long-toed, monkeyish feet, with an exclamation mark at the end. He also is racist. Like, okay, there's a few instances in the book where he uses terms like colored or I don't know if I'm allowed to say this word, but it's black in Spanish to refer to people. He uses a lot of language like that. I'm not 100% sure if it's because he's racist, which he is, or if it's just because that was the language that was used in like 1950 or whenever this was written. But there is one line in the book. It's on page 33. I have shared this line with like 5 different people, and none of them think it's as funny as I think it is. So please tell me if you laugh. It's okay, you can tell me. He basically talks about how he went on like some kind of Arctic Canadian excursion. He helped in like doing research in Arctic Canada, and he's talking about how slim the pickings are up there when it comes to nymphettes. He says, I felt curiously aloof from my old self. No temptations maddened me. The plump, glossy little Eskimo girls with their fish smell, hideous raven hair, and guinea pig faces evoked even less desire in me than Dr. Johnson had. Nymphettes do not occur in polar regions. That's so fucking funny to me. I don't know why. But he lives like an entire life in Europe where he's like racist and fatphobic and a pedophile. Like the first third of the book is that. And you get like tiny glimpses of that in the 1997 film. Like he talks about the polar excursion he went on for like a line in the movie, and that's pretty much it. But I just think it's so funny how the 1997 movie characterizes him versus how he actually is in the book, because in the book his entire plan was to move to America so that he could live with a 12-year-old of his colleague. Like, he wasn't gonna move to America. Yeah, he had a money incentive. I think there was like some kind of will arrangement with one of his uncles who had died. If he moved to America, he would get a couple thousand a month, something like that. But he was like, yeah, I wasn't really gonna go do that, but I'm gonna go live in a colleague's house. And he has a 12-year-old daughter. I've seen pictures of her. that's the whole thing. He keeps talking about how he is gonna move to America and how excited he is to live with this 12-year-old, this poor unsuspecting 12-year-old who he's gonna groom. That's the whole thing. Versus in the movie, he's just like, oh, I'm moving to America and I'm gonna live in my friend's house. Oh no, their house burned down. Oh, well, now Mrs. Dolores Hayes is offering me a spot, and I guess I'll just have to live there. And oh my god, there's a daughter there. She's 12. But I'm not attracted to 12-year-olds or anything. I just had, when I was 12 myself, my girlfriend died, so now I'm kind of attached to girls around that age because of the one that I lost all those years ago. Versus in the book, he's a straight up pedophile. And like, the further you get into the movie, the farther he borders on pedophilia. Like, he gets worse and worse throughout the movie, and like, to the point where you can't like defend him. But in the beginning, it seems like they're trying to make a lot of excuses for why he is the way that he is and how he ended up in that situation. Versus book, 100% of the plan was to move to America to groom a 12-year-old, and that house burned down, so he was gonna go back to the UK or something until he found out there was a different 12-year-old that he could groom instead. But he hates fat people, and it's kind of funny how I know I keep saying this, but it's hilarious how bad of a person he is. Like, he has a wife named Valeria. She kind of sucks. I don't really like her, but she is a little bit heavier. She becomes a little bit heavier after they get married. And every time he describes her, like, I have them highlighted. Valeria, as she waddled by my side, began to shake her poodle head vigorously. She by now was preening herself between him and me, rouging her pursed lips, tripling her chin to pick at her blouse, bosom, and so forth. And yeah, just every opportunity he gets, my fat bitch of a wife, my ugly fat bitch wife with 7 chins, who waddles beside me, waddle waddle, feet line. And once he marries Dolores Hayes, he starts describing her as fat, which is not how I pictured her kind of like how she's casted in the 1962 film. Maybe a little bit bigger, but besides that, I think the only thing that the 1962 film did better than the 1997 film was the casting of Mrs. Hayes and the relationship between Mrs. Hayes and Dolores, Lolita, because in the 1997 version, don't get me wrong, I really loved that movie. I think the way they chose to cast her actress works better for that movie, and I think the relationship dynamic they went with between Mrs. Hayes and Lolita, I think that worked better for that movie. But it isn't completely accurate to the book because they fucking don't like each other in the book. Mrs. Hayes is trying so hard to get rid of Lolita. She's just jealous of her. She hates her. Versus in the 1997 movie version, you get kind of like hints of that, but overall you still like sense love between them, especially like in the way she mourns her mother after she dies. But to talk about the movies again, I think that both movies took quite a few creative liberties. I already said both of the movies pretty much cut out the first entire third of the book, which I feel like is kind of necessary. I don't need to just sit there watch him have sex with 15-year-old prostitutes and talk about how much he hates his fat wife. I don't need that. But they both definitely took liberties on his motives for coming to America, and they kind of really sugarcoated how horrible of a person he is. But overall, the creative liberties that they took in the 1997 version made the movie better. And the creative liberties they took in the 1962 version made the movie worse, in my opinion, which I feel bad because this is the first Stanley Kubrick film that I'm ever watching, and I've heard that he's like the best director ever, top 5 best directors ever. I just didn't like it. It was somehow 2 hours. They skipped the first third of the book, and they skipped the entire 6-month or year-long road trip. Literally, the 1997 version, for me personally, I think the road trip is one of the best parts of the movie. It's definitely up there for the best parts of the movie, and I was so excited to see how they would do that in the 1962 version. But in the 1962 version, literally the second that Dolores' mom dies, the second she dies, the movie is like 6 months late, 1 year later. They 1 year later away the entire road trip, which is like half the book. It doesn't make sense to me. Also, sorry about the rain. They also completely, in my opinion, changed the character of Quilty. I really like the way that the 1997 version portrayed Quilty, and I'll get closer in case you can't hear me because of the rain. In the 1962 version, Quilty was annoying. He just would not stop talking, which is not who he was in the book. He was like goofy, and I wonder if I haven't seen that many old movies, so I wonder if old movies are just like that. It felt throughout the movie that they only had 1 or 2 takes for every scene, because Quilty would be sitting there talking and he would be like, like trying to remember his next line, and it would make it into the movie. And that also happened with, I think, Lolita and with Humbert Humbert. They would just like be stuttering and forgetting their lines, and it made it into the movie. So maybe just old movies are like that and I'm not used to that. But Quilty was so annoying every time he was on screen, which I feel like I wouldn't have minded that much if that's who he was in the book. But in the book he says like maybe 1 paragraph of line throughout the entire book. Like he says that, like, where the devil did you get her? He mishears it as that, and it's like, how about this weather? Like, he has like 4 lines like that in kind of like the middle of the book, and then at the end he has that like, I know the police, and I know things about the police in this town that make them my slave. Like, he has like maybe 10 lines the whole book, versus in the 1962 movie, like, if you haven't seen it, I can't describe it. There's no other way to say. He just does not stop talking. Full minutes on screen, talking about how cool he is, and all the sex he has, and how girls love him, and he's just annoying. So I really don't understand why they made that creative decision to completely change Quilty's character into an even worse, less mysterious, less cool character. I also think that the 1962 version portrayed Humbert worse than the 1997 version. Neither of them were accurate to the book, but I like the 1997 version way better. Just physically, physically nobody really matched the description in the 1962 movie besides Mrs. Hayes. Like, Humbert was like a short, dark-haired Italian man in the 1962 version for some reason. It was all so odd to me. Lolita with an incestuous thrill I had grown to regard as my child. That's awesome. It occurred to me that a prolonged confinement with a nice cesarean operation and other complications in a maternity ward sometime next spring would give me a chance to be alone with my Lolita for weeks, perhaps, and gorge on the limp nymphette with sleeping pills. He goes into like 4 pages worth of detail, like deep detail, describing exactly how he would drown Mrs. Hayes and how he would get away with it, like second by second, play by play of how he would drown her and how it would all work out for him. And then at the end of it, he's like, but what'd you know, folks? I just couldn't make myself do it. Like he wanted points for not killing her. He's like, yeah, I was gonna murder my wife so I could groom and rape her 12-year-old daughter, but I'm just too good of a guy. But yeah, like I was saying, in the 1997 version, Mrs. Hayes is like beautiful. She's like so pretty. Her voice is pretty. Her style is pretty. She carries herself, I think, quite elegantly. I mean, she's a little bit clumsy, but so am I. I think she's beautiful. I don't think by any stretch of the definition you could call her fat. Like, even for the 90s, I asked my mom. She was like, no, that wasn't fat in the 90s either. Which is, like, fine. I think they casted her very well. I just don't understand why they kept calling her fat in the movie when she's beautiful. I like this line. Queer! I who was jealous of every male we met. Queer! I who was jealous of every male we met. Another example, I think, of the 1997 version of the movie, the creative liberties they took improving the movie overall is the whole murder me like you murdered my mother scene. That scene is so powerful in the movie, and I expected it to be in the book, but it isn't, and it wasn't in the 1962 version either. And I think that scene just adds so much complexity to the whole relationship, and it adds so much like anxious tension to the things that follow that scene, like the life events that follow that scene, her abandoning him, stuff like that. Because, like, just for a second is she allowed to express how she truly feels towards him, and she still can't get away. It isn't possible for her, but just for a second she's allowed to say, murder me like you murdered my mother. And then she has to keep living with him. She takes advantage of it as most as she can, but not that much. And Humbert's dumbass just has to sit there in the driver's seat and pretend like he doesn't know exactly how she feels about him. He gets to sit there and pretend like his grooming is still 100% working and that she's still madly in love with him. In the book, she writes him a letter when she's like 10 about how she has a crush on him, and that's like his perch to start grooming her. Like, oh, you like me? I'm like one of those movie stars you like because I'm blonde. But in the book, it's not. In the movie, it's not like that, which I don't mind too much. It was a little bit, I don't know, it sets a little bit of a different vibe to it, but I don't mind that. There's a line, Albert Riggs, assistant professor, but it looks like ass professor. I like that. I also highlight the phrase big W on page 204. this school, Beardsley, that Dolly goes to, is so weird. Like, they pull Humbert aside and they're like, yo, why isn't she fucking? Like, I don't know what the purpose of that was in the book or the movie. Well, in the book, because it comes from the book. I don't know why Vladimir chose to make the school like that. Is that like his interpretation of what American schools are like? I don't know. I highlighted the phrase clapped her big plump hands together. The fragility of those bare arms of yours, how I long to enfold them. All your four limpid lovely limbs, a folded colt, a take to your head between my unworthy hands, and pull the temple skin back on both sides and kiss your Chinese eyes. Not sure why I highlighted that. There's somebody named Balzac. Balzac. I highlighted that. There's somebody named Avis Chapman, but I highlighted it because at first I read it as Alvin Chipmunk. I had a lot of fun with this book. I think I might read it again one day. But I'm currently reading. I'm reading along with Dracula. I just, now that I'm reading, I feel like I'm in a secret club, kinda. I don't know. But I don't want to read, like, just whatever, you know. I really like books that I can, like, I don't know the word, envelop myself in. Like Lolita took me 2 weeks to read, and it has 2 movies to go along with it, plus Lana Del Rey's entire discography. I'm kidding. I do feel as if I understand a few of Lana's songs more deeply now, though. That's not a lie. But it's just a very famous book with 2 movies and a lot of discourse about it and a lot of opinions, and I like being able to become a part of something or have something become a part of me that I can like really get myself into, you know what I mean? Because I can mentally participate in discussions with other people. I don't reply to them, but I like reading a lot of different people's perspectives on the book, what they took away from it, what they think about it, what they think about the movies, stuff like that. I like that there's 2 movies for me to compare it to, just like something with substance. Right now, I'm reading along with Dracula. Yes, I'm reading along with the audiobook, because I'm not good at reading. And then I think Bram Stoker has another book about Dracula that I might read to go along with it. Plus there's like an infinite amount of movies and stuff about Dracula or starring a version of Dracula. So I think I'm gonna really be into that for a little while. Speaking of not being very good at reading, throughout the whole book I've been underlining every word that I don't understand. Like, page 30, Inveigiled, Inveigiled, or Pugilist, what else? I don't know why I do this, I'm doing it with Dracula too. Like, I don't underline every word I don't know. Like, if it's in French, by the way, like, half this book is in French. Like, a ridiculous amount of this is in French. I'm not into it. But there's some things that I like about watching the movie more, because, like, you see it, so you don't have to wonder, like, context, you know what I mean? Like, in the book, they keep talking about Piazza. Let's go to the Piazza. I'm in the Piazza. And you're like, what the fuck is a Piazza? But in the movie, they're like, this is the Piazza. And you're like, oh, piazza just means outside, you know? But yeah, piazza, Favonian, Pulsade, Palside, Anent, mirthful, gentili, antecedent, ululations, recumbent, poplar. I'm pretty sure poplar is just a type of tree. Libidream, shod, banal, surreptitiously, friable, mollify, catalyst. Like if I sonorous. If I couldn't figure out what it meant based on context clues, and I'm pretty sure it was in English, I underlined it. But if I couldn't figure out what a word meant to the point where I had to look it up to keep going, I didn't underline it. But if every time I passed a word where I was like, what? Okay. Then I underlined it. Pharmacopoeal, vermicelitude, chintzes, cretons, chiaroscuro, ecru, ochre, neuralgia, apostately, congeneric, connobile. Just a lot of words. I underlined a lot of words. But yeah, the whole murder me like you murdered my mother scene. I think the 1962 version, the thing that works so well about the 1997 version is I feel like she looks like she could be 12. Versus the 1962 version, I don't know if it's just the way they dressed and did their makeup back then, because I looked it up. The actress was like 16 in the 1962 version, and the actress was like 15 in the 1997 version. But she looked 16. And like, I know 16 is a child, but she looked too mature to be playing a 12-year-old. You know, I feel like there's kind of a difference between a 16-year-old and a 12-year-old in that position. And she was never referred to as 12 in the 1962 version, so I don't even think that was what they were going for. But I think the fact that she was 16 the whole movie, and Humbert was way less rapey the whole time, it just, all the meaning felt like it was sucked out of the 1962 version of Lolita. Like, obviously it was still a shitty situation, but like, it wasn't Lolita. It's bad, you know what I mean? But yeah, I don't know. I feel like I'm part of a secret club now. I feel like now that I've read this book, I have secret knowledge, and I'm in the club with everyone else that has read the book. I don't look good, and I know that I don't look good. I just got out of the hospital. I'm on a bunch of steroids right now, so I've gained a lot of weight, like at least 10 or 15 pounds. You can see it in my face. My hair is a lot darker, so I just look different. I know I don't look good. Like, I know. Have I forgotten anything? I almost forgot about my girl Nancy. So, I have realized I much prefer pre-loved books. I don't really like new books. And this was owned by a woman named Nancy Horan. I'm guessing sometime in the 80s, maybe 90s. She made a lot of notes in this book before I ended up with it. Nancy, if you're out there, I'd really like to know what these notes were for. My mother's best guess is that it was for a reading project at school, but random things are underlined, random things are circled. Like, let me find one. Chapter 33, which starts with the sentence, "In the gay town of Leppingville." She underlines the line, "a box of sanitary pads," and she writes above it, "beginning of quote-unquote womanhood." What else? She says something about anal, I think, at one point. Yeah, she points to the word pederosis and says anal intercourse, which I'm guessing is what that word is. I don't know. Pederosis, what? "After all, I had some experience in my life of pederosis, had visually possessed dappled nymphettes in parks, had wedged my wary and bestial way into the hottest, most crowded corner of a city bus full of strap-hanging school children." Nancy says anal intercourse. Thank you, Nancy. She also underlined the sentence, "My little cup brims with tittles." My little cup brims with tittles. I don't know what that means, but I really like it. "But let us be prim and civilized. Humbert tried to be good. He tried, he really truly, he did. He had the utmost respect for ordinary children with their purity and vulnerability, and under no circumstances would he have interfered with the innocence of a child, if there was the least risk of a row. But how his heart beat when among innocent throng he espied a demon child, enfant charmante et forbe, dim eyes, bright lips, 10 years of jail if you only show her you're looking at her. So life went. Humbert was perfectly capable of intercourse with Eve, but it was Lilith he longed for. The budding stage of breast development appears early, 10.7 years, in the sequence of somatic changes accompanying pubescence, and the next maturational item available is the first appearance of pigmented pubic hair, 11.2 years. My little cup brims with tittles. He's so fucking disgusting. But yeah, Nancy made a lot of notes. She underlined a lot of interesting things. I highlighted every time I saw the word queer or gay, because I like that. But yeah, I am in your secret club now, Lolita enjoyers. I like the book. I thought it was really funny. I don't think I was supposed to find it as funny as I did. I like the 1990s. I think the 1997 movie is not the same as the book, but it tells a different part of the same story, and I think they do it pretty damn well. The only thing the 1962 version did better was their casting of Mrs. Hayes, if you're trying to be book accurate. But if you don't care about book accuracy, then I prefer the 1997 casting anyway. I didn't realize it until I went back and reread the preamble or whatever it's called. But Mrs. Where is she? Yeah, Mrs. Richard F. Schiller died in childbirth on Christmas Day in 1952. So yeah, it was from the book, but it didn't say it, like, at the end, like it did in the movie. So when I first watched the movie, before going back and reading the preamble or whatever it's called, I thought that adding that Lolita died, like right after the movie ended. They both died very quickly after the movie ended. I thought that was a very interesting addition because Dr. Humbert was like, I do not want this book released until both of us are dead. And then it's like released 2 years later. What's up with that? So I think both of them dying, it adds to the tragedy and adds to the story when you realize it after just experiencing this whole thing, knowing that this poor little girl, her brother dies, her father dies, her mother isn't that fond of her, her mother dies, she gets groomed and taken advantage of by multiple men up until the age of 17, where she dies in childbirth. Wow. I just love it. I feel bad saying this, but Humbert reminds me of men that I've known, not in action, because I haven't known any European men that moved to America to groom a girl, move across the country to groom a girl, 12-year-old, brim little cup full of tittles. I don't know men like that, but in mannerisms and in thought process, I feel like I have known a lot of men who think the way that Humbert thinks, and it was kind of jarring to read the book and realize that this evil, evil man reminds me of people that I've known in my real life. I love Dolores. I feel bad for her. I think that since this book is from the perspective of Humbert, I think we don't really get to meet the true her. We get glimpses of the true her from his twisted perspective. But overall, I understand why this is one of the most popular books ever. And it really wasn't that bad. I mean, obviously we're hearing a long story of this racist, hateful, judgmental, sour person groom a girl, a young poor girl, and taking advantage of her in every way across the span of years. Obviously that story sucks, but I don't really get how this is like book burningly bad. Like, I know they'll burn anything they don't like, but like, it's not hardcore torture porn. It's very real. And like, crazy shit is happening, obviously. People dying in the way that they did, him being able to get away with this for as long as he did, his life ending up the way that it did. That's crazy. But it's crazy in a believable way, in my opinion. So I feel like this book is like real life. Shit like this happens in real life. So I don't understand the urge to hush it up and censor it when shit happens, you know? But Jesus Christ, I've been talking for 43 minutes. What do you think of Lolita? I'm reading Dracula, then I might read the other Bram Stoker Dracula book, and maybe if there's any other supplemental material about Dracula, I might read it. And I'm definitely gonna watch the 1992 Bram Stoker's Dracula, and maybe some other movies as well regarding Dracula. So I think I'm doing Dracula right now. And my mother bought me the Feminine Mystique, so I might read that after. I also bought Moran's Search for Meaning and Wuthering Heights. I got those at the Goodwill. So I don't know I think I'm just gonna use these as like backup books. What other? I'll show you my book list. Actually, can you even see it good? Feminine Mystique, Frankenstein, Venus and Aphrodite, Invitation to a Beheading, The Stranger by Albert Camus, Heaven by Meiko Kawakami, Dante's Inferno, Scarlet Letter, Schoolgirl by Osamu Dazai, The Myth of Sisyphus, Yellow Wallpaper, The Consolation of Happiness, The Second Sex, The Metamorphosis, and Dracula's Guest. Those are the books that I'm probably definitely going to read. And then in the maybe pile, I have The Secret History, Cleopatra and Frankenstein, Lord of the Flies, The Iliad, Labyrinths. That's it for now, but I'm constantly adding on to it. Thank you for watching. Let me know what you think. Amen.